Welcome to Six and the Six. Tonight's amazing guest, Kelsey Lensman. Kelsey, yay.
Oh, I
Thank,
appreciate it.
yeah, thank you very much for being here. For people watching, my first time meeting Kelsey was this past weekend in Columbus, Push Pull event.
Yep.
My first time at a all women pick things up and put them down. They're heavy competition. And I'll tell you what, I wasn't surprised I had such a good time, but it was really an amazing event for me to experience the emotion behind hitting PRs.
Hmm.
And probably, as you would know from having dinner Friday night, I see a little emotion in them, and I got a little emotional myself. It was touching, and then just giving fist bumps to these people who didn't know me. It like breathed life into me. So that was really cool.
Oh, it was, and I appreciate you driving as far as you did. It was 6+ hours to come to Columbus, Ohio. So I'm glad that we somewhat made it worth your time. But I'm telling you, those events, well, I know we'll talk a lot about the mindset and pieces to it. They breathe life into me selfishly, because it's so cool to see people break their limits, and it's so cool to see people come in scared, and then they step on the platform and they're shaken, and then they do the weight that they never thought they could do. And I know you experience this in sports. They realize that they're self-limiting themselves, right? Like, I thought I could do this, but actually I can do this. And when they actually break that belief, John, like, it's game over. Nosy, not John. I learned that on
Rosie,
Friday
you
night.
got it.
Nosy. It's everything. So I just appreciate you road tripping up to it for it.
Oh, absolutely. And you're exactly right. It's a win-win. And it's to me, it's the more we can pour in, the more they get, and the more we get back out of it, just seeing them, like you said, hit those standards and those bars that they didn't think they could.
Yeah.
So this is mainly like a goalie, lacrosse, soccer kind of field hockey podcast. So my limited audience probably doesn't know a lot about what you do. And we'll get into how we kind of got connected. But before we get in there, why don't you tell us a little bit about Empower Her Fitness, the events you guys run, and
Yeah.
then your Mission 48 you did over the past summer, 9 months, however that worked out. And what
Yeah.
I'm really interested in is the rocks ruling our experience, and just how did all that come to be for you?
Oh man, buckle up, everybody. Here we go. So honestly, I got started in the fitness world about 7, 8 years ago. And I'll tell you, I never thought I would be here today. I was a ex-athlete. I missed my sports, I missed my girls. And in college, I kind of had an identity crisis of, okay, I'm not an athlete anymore. Like, who am I? What do I do? And I imagine for a lot of the athletes out there, either you're in your sport or you're listening to this as you're transitioning, or maybe you're out of it now. And for me, I didn't realize how big of an identity that was for me until it was gone. So side note to all the athletes there, like, take time and cherish the moments you have with your team, and the games that you're working towards, and just like the common goal, because for me, I didn't realize how special it was until I was out of it, a lot of it. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so that was college. I went from working towards a goal till then not having a goal for me from a physical athletic standpoint. I was giving to everybody else around me. I was doing the path, right? You get good grades in school. I always say I was gonna graduate, go to PT school, have 2.5 kids, have a white picket fence, and here we go, right?
There we go.
And that's how I lived life a lot back then, is like just checking the boxes off. And then I started just getting back into the fitness role because I wanted to feel like myself again. And that's one of the avenues that I knew to take. I'm like, well, you're not really doing anything physically, Kels. You love sports, like, get yourself back into it in a way. Never lifted before, had no idea what the heck I was doing. But then that really just started my own physical, yes, transformation, but it was even more nosy, mental, emotional. And so I went from thinking that I was going to go to physical therapy grad school and have my whole life planned out till 3 months before I graduated. I had a gut feeling that I should start a business. And so I started a business, having zero experience with it. And honestly, that business was geared towards a lot of the girls and women, like a year, 2 years ago, that I was of, hey, I know there's something else out there for me. I know that I have more capability, but where is it? Like, how do I actually tap into it? And so I started my business out of undergrad, and it was called not Empower Fitness, but KML Movement. And I worked a lot with sports medicine and fitness because I was in the athletic training world, and I was tired of seeing people injured, and I was trying to prevent a lot of those injuries from happening. So I started that then, twist, turn, up, down, jump, jive. That then transitioned to Empower Fitness about 4 or 5 years after that. And then we do online nutrition and fitness coaching for women and girls around the country. And then we also do, which is what you came to, the EmpowHER Fitness events. And those are all women's strength events of all different ages, all different backgrounds, and just work to a common goal of basically kicking some butt on a platform and show yourself that you're stronger than you think, and
Oh yeah,
just
I
giving
loved
women
it.
an opportunity for it.
How
So
do you,
that's Empower. Well, we'll talk about Mission 48 a little bit later. It's a whole
yeah,
different
yeah.
ball.
How do you think you talked about kind of losing or maybe misplacing your identity coming out of being an athlete? How do you feel? Do you feel that just shifted into your fitness world, or did you learn to kind of manage that identity a little better to be more well-rounded, I guess, to
That
like
is a that's a great question, because I went from when I was an athlete, my whole worth was tied to how I did in the game. If I played terrible, then I didn't even want to go out to see everybody in the stands. Like I felt like it was Kelsey the human did bad versus, hey, I just had a bad game, you know? And so that was a lot of my identity piece towards there when I played sports. And then after, I think I realized through those experiences that for me, confidence truly is not just about how well you do or how much weight you lift or anything like that. It's truly about you keeping promises to yourself and you stepping out of your comfort zone, putting yourself in bigger arenas where you might fail, where you might not be able to do it. And so for me, I built my confidence and I built my identity on something different versus this external fragile thing, because we're all going to have bad games and we're all not going to do well at times, you know? And so that was a big piece for me, identity wise, of no, it's about you keeping promises to yourself. That's where your confidence comes from, not just how well you do in a game or how you do in a bodybuilding competition, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. That's funny. It takes me back to kind of you're talking to the athletes before they started this weekend, and some of the things I really loved was the way you conveyed that message, and it obviously had some personal experience through there, and I couldn't help but think, wow, what a great role model for these female athletes. Just knowing your story where you came through, and the four things that really hit me were the first one was and I talk about it a lot, is you say leave it all on the platform, right? Don't give yourself any room for excuses. Just how important is it to get up there and just put yourself out there and, succeed or fail. The point is you attempted it. How important do you think that is for the confidence side of things?
Oh, so important. And especially for those individuals listening to this podcast, it might not be a powerlifting platform. This might be the field that you play on, the court, the business that you want to start, whatever this is. So I want you to relate this in different areas. But a lot of women, and I'll segment us initially. Yes, people, but I'm going to segment us women and call us out a little bit. Is a lot of us are really afraid to fail. And a lot of us are really afraid to look silly in front of people or fail in front of people, especially. And so, and I'll relate this to mine, I would hold myself back. Well, I can do this. So let me just pick this number to do on the platform because I know that I can do it, you know? Or, hey, when I play basketball, let me try this move because I'm 99.9% sure I can actually do it versus try the new move that I'm not as confident in, but I need to try it in a game if I'm actually going to do it, you know? And so I told our girls this weekend, I was like, leave it all out there on the platform. Don't leave this door thinking, man, I wish I've done a little bit more weight because what if? You know, it's that question of what if when you leave. And yes, hopefully, God willing, there's other opportunities to be able to do that. But you don't know, you know? And so I tell all our women, even if you're afraid that you're going to fail, which it's not the end of the world if you do, but leave it all out there. Don't let that little what if game play in your head as you walk outside those doors. And that little comment usually is what sticks with people. And when they're contemplating, oh, should I go this way or this way? It's like, leave it all out on the floor. Like play all out. And that's when you know that, okay, I can put my head on a pillow. I'm so proud of myself today.
Well, yeah, and that's it takes out the space to put the would have, could have, should haves in there, and the result is of what I kind of started with. One of the my what I experienced was just that raw emotion of hitting those PRs or having attempted it or done it. So I think that's huge. The second thing you really talked about, and you didn't specifically call it, you made me think of Abby Wambach's book Wolfpack when you talked about the support of each other and just be here and support. And I think in your bio on your website, one of your things says build a community of women that want to see each other win.
You read my
Um,
website. You're that's literally word for word. I love
yeah,
it.
well, I have to go in and do some reading and to make sure I'm like not totally dense. Um, so I mean, you're basically saying the same thing. So how how does that relate, like that support as they're looking at other opportunities in their life? And I think we may have talked about over the weekend, not fighting for that one seat at the table, but build a bigger table.
Oh my gosh, yes. And that actually deeply hits home with me, because when I started my fitness journey, I had amazing people in my life, but not the necessarily the people that saw the vision that I saw or was going to make the changes in their life to improve themselves. They were really pretty content with where they were at, right? And so when I started to kind of really focus on my fitness journey and take steps out, sorry, and this is my dog here, decides he wants to be crazy on this one.
That's all right.
Um, but when I started to put myself outside of my comfort zone and do that uncomfortable thing, I felt very alone. A lot of people left my life because I was going to the gym at different times and not going out in the bar drinking, And so I personally felt pretty alone for the first few years in my fitness journey. And when I was improving myself, a lot of times I questioned, like, am I even actually doing the right thing? Even though I was like on paper and I knew consciously I was, but I didn't have that community around me to say, like, Kels, keep freaking going. Like, there's people out there like you that are driven, that want to continue to improve. And especially, and once again, I'm going to call our girls out here. It can be a very catty type of thing when some girls get together and it's like, well, I want to be better than her, and vice versa. And it's like, can't we just all win? Can't we? And that's not just rainbows and sunshine, but when you build that community around you of women that aren't going after each other, but are actually supporting each other, one, you realize that there's not just one seat at the table, right? It's like the old adage of all tides rise with it instead of just going individually to yourself. And so I'm a big proponent of, hey, we're going to support the hell out of each other. Sorry to cuss, but that's what I say at the event. Support the hell out of each other here, because that support system, you are going to, one, fall back on at times, but then you're also going to build this community around you of individuals that continue to rise. And by association, you rise as a result too. And that is just so, so important.
Yeah, I love that analogy, that image of the rise, all the ships rising. And I think you make a good point about the cattiness. I think when we have that community that will kind of pick you up when you need it without blasting it out to social media that, oh, Knowles, he couldn't do this,
Yep.
blah, 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 right? I think that's huge. And yeah, just that, I totally agree with that one.
Yeah.
The other thing I really liked is, and you touched on it a little bit in the athlete thing, is just the physical manifestation of silencing your inner critic. It's
Mhm.
and we talked about it a little earlier in that, leave no excuses, don't believe the lies that you can't do this, and just getting up there and sweating it out. And man, I could see the determination standing over the bar or lying under that bar. You could just see them speaking to that inner voice, and beating that down. What are your thoughts on the physical ties to the mental side of that activity?
Oh man, it is almost a one-to-one correlation. So I'll preview a little bit from my story. Is I didn't realize there was a difference between voices in my head. I thought way back in the day, before a lot was talked about the inner critic, or a lot was talk about like that little voice inside your head that doubts or questions, like, what if you can't do this, or what if you're going to fail, right? I thought that voice was me and true the entire time. I thought well, you know what, just don't get up. I thought that was me. I thought like there wasn't a difference between that inner critic, or that little voice is what I call it, and myself. And so I would listen to it all this time and I'm like, well, I guess I'm just not like them, right? The motivated ones, or the ones that work out all the time, or the ones that are super disciplined. I thought because that wasn't my voice in my head, well, I guess just I wasn't born with whatever voice that they have, And so the moment I realized, and I don't remember where, I don't remember when, I don't remember what it was from, but the moment I realized that I didn't have to listen to that voice, that I had an option, or I could choose whether that voice is going to control not only my actions, but my outcome, the game was forever changed. I swear the game was forever changed because I didn't know a difference then. And I'm not saying at times that voice still wins at times, it still comes up. I tell everyone, in my opinion, it never goes away, no matter how deep you get.
Never.
Yeah, it never goes away once you win this thing or do this thing or keep these promises. It's still there, but you gain control of it. You talk back to it versus you listening to it. And so you asked a question about the physical and the mental and like how they correlate there, especially and this could be individuals on a quarter of field, not even just under a bar. But for me specifically, when I showed myself physically what I was capable of, and that little voice was like, you can't hit that weight. No, you can't do 135. You can't even do 125. And then I did it. That little voice slowly started to shut up a little bit. And I started to prove myself right and prove that voice wrong. And
Right.
especially for no matter who you are, when you start to literally prove, not just talk yourself out of it, but prove that little voice wrong through your action, that's when it really starts getting good. And then you realize that voice doesn't have control over me. No, I can have control over it, but it takes action, and it takes daily action to be able to really slowly silence it or just calm it down a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with that daily action. And I think you mentioned an interesting thing about, getting to your target, or I don't necessarily want to call it your goal, but it's like it's fulfilling for a brief moment in time, and then it quickly becomes unfulfilling because, if it's on the field and you won the national title, let's say that, you're in the grocery store the next morning and someone's like, you're going to do it again. It's kind of like very fleeting and everyone just expects it again or more. And, that stuff's all out of our control. So I think the little voice, when you hit that, it's like, okay, well, you did that, you can't do more. Okay, you did that, you can't do more. When you're working with your athletes, how important is it to focus them on the journey rather than a specific destination?
Exponentially important. And I'll share not to always share stories, but I think people can relate to it or take some things from stories. So when I was initially starting my fitness journey, I had a massive target goal, whatever you want to call it, to compete in a bodybuilding show. No idea how I was going to do it. I physically did not feel, look, anything like what I thought I needed to look or feel like to get there. And I'm not condoning bodybuilding. Please, it's not necessarily the healthiest thing, but it was a big part of my journey initially. And I remember the moment I stepped on that stage in a body I never thought that I could get, and receive that first place medal, I realized in that moment, Nolsey, it was about the journey. It had nothing to do with this medal. It had nothing to do with the bodybuilding show day. I realized I loved the journey, loved the process for the journey of it. And there's actually, and I'm not going to quote this, but there's actually a lot of neuroscience out there to talk about the serotonin and the dopamine that your body gets through the process versus that achievement piece of it. And I truly think that if you focus on not only just the process, the ups and downs, but what you need to do in that process day in and day out, that goal, that target is going to be attained without you even focusing on it. And I specifically remember there was one also moment in my journey where I was doubting. I was questioning, can I actually get to that stage? How am I going to get there? I was right outside the Ohio State. It's called the RPAC, like our fitness center. And it was just the moment of, there's no way I'm going to get to that goal. And those individuals listening, you might be at practice, you might be listening in a car, and you have this big game, maybe a few months ahead, or it's a championship. And you're like, I don't know how we're going to get there. Right. And I was saying this to myself in the moment, and I had somebody come that I was talking to right next to me, and they're like, Kels, they're like, that goal, that day is 4 months ahead. If you don't focus on the stuff you're doing today, you are dang right you're not going to get there. But you're so focused on that goal 4 months ahead that it's distracting you from the things that you have control over today that will dictate, hopefully, a better outcome 4 months ahead that you don't even know anything about. Right. And so for me, I really, when I'm kind of lost in the target or the goal that I'm working towards, I bring myself back to that phase for me. And I'm like, Kels, focus on the process. And if you can do that, the goal will most likely be attained without you even having to focus on it. And if not, you learn a ton in the process along the way.
I 100% agree with that. And that goes right back, well, it goes back to two things. One, why I feel you were such a good role model speaking to the athletes ahead of time, having lived through that. The second thing was just the fact about how confidence is built, and we talked about it earlier off the podcast of that, confidence is won or lost on a daily basis. And it's if we can be focused on the small victories every day, we can kind of keep that momentum going. Um, and that's exactly what you're talking about there, and if we can break down that 4 month goal into, what's today, what's this week, what's this month, the next
Yep.
thing you know, bam, you're there.
Yeah, yeah. And we work with a lot of women in their nutrition and fitness journeys, and they have big goals that they want to work towards, right? And I talk about winning the day a ton, that phrase, and it's a pretty common phrase, but I want to bring it up here because it's just perfectly timed with it. Is when you win the day and your whole focus on just winning that day. That might be, the three things on your list. That might be having a solid practice, whatever you qualify as winning the day, which I would really challenge you to actually qualify it versus just think about what is a win, what is a loss. And you're not going to win every day, but when you solely focus on that, or if you take the L that day, you show up again and you say, hey, I never take two L's twice. Like I never go two L's twice in a row. That mentality switch gets you from thinking about this crazy random goal and gets you to actually work on what is today. How do I win today? And usually the individuals that we've worked with that can focus on today, focus on winning the day, they work out 10 times better than the individuals that have a big goal, but really do not have the skill set to still win the day. And so that's massive right there.
I like that you added in some intentionality about looking at you called them the L's, don't do two L's in a row. I like to focus and talk about with my athletes well, why, better, how, which the better how part of it's what you talked about is, hey, what didn't really go well today, what could I do better, and how am I going to do it so I can bring that into tomorrow. But I think maybe more importantly, we quite often don't recognize the well. It'd be like, hey, Kels, how'd your game go today? And you'll be like, oh, I did great. And everyone's like, oh, good job, boom. But I think we need to think about why to create those little mental anchors. So when you are struggling, you can be like, oh, hey, I did this before. Uh, I mean, how do you feel about the processing those wells also?
Oh, and I'm not that I just want to agree with you on everything because I will disagree if I disagree, but right now you were speaking my language with it and almost everything that you're saying, because especially for the individuals that are very driven, that might be the person on the team that, wants to keep getting better, which is such a beautiful quality, right? Such a beautiful
Oh yeah.
quality. Or the individual like myself that like feels like they can still grow and expand, which we all can in different ways. We have, and I'll say we have a tendency to overlook what we're doing well because we're so focused on how we can get better, right? And if we don't understand, hey, why did today go really well? Why did I leave practice and I was really proud of myself? If we don't process why we won today or why we did very well today, whatever it's practice, work, whatever that is, we're not going to understand how to replicate that, right? And in my opinion, a lot of this is just X's and O's, it's processes, right? There's no magic poof where, oh yeah, today is amazing and today is not amazing. It's like
Right.
there's a process to this stuff. And so if you can understand why today went well when you're in that hard situation, or I always talk about momentum, when there's a momentum dip a little bit here, you realize, okay, it's not that I'm a bad person or it's not that I'm doing terrible. It's, hey, what are the things that I stopped doing or I can start doing that when I did well, I actually did, right? And so then you're able to kind of pull yourself back out of that momentum dip. And it also allows you to say, hey, I actually did well today. And for especially a lot of us girls, it's really important to say, hey, I did freaking well and this is why. And that builds confidence in of itself that you notice those things in yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I think it also keeps that inner critic kind of shoved down. I think if we don't process the whys on that, that voice will pop up and say, "Oh, well, you just got lucky today," or especially if the next day you don't do it again, right? If you haven't figured out why that went well, that little voice is gonna be going, "Told you you couldn't do that. Told you you couldn't do it twice in a row." So, yeah, I
Yep.
totally agree with that.
Yep.
Ohio State. So you talked earlier about you're going to Ohio State. You've got your path all figured out, supposedly. And I think on your website you said something about there was a different pull at your heartstrings.
Yep.
And we kind of talked about your identity and your kind of shift in direction. Um, Talk about your that pull on your heartstrings and following that passion and maybe finding your calling. And how did
Mhm.
that, I mean, how do you reconnect all that with your why? Or maybe you didn't know your why until that point in time. How do you feel about that connection?
Oh man, I'll say this is my senior year to give individuals context. This is my senior year of college, and the Kelsey prior to her senior year was very cut and dry. I stayed in the lines. I didn't tiptoe out the lines a lot. I wanted to do, the next right thing and get an A and graduate college and rainbows and sunshine, right? And I very reluctantly would make other people uncomfortable or make myself uncomfortable. Like I just did what is right. That's the best way that I could describe it. And then, like I said, when I kind of flip flopped my life my senior year and started focusing on myself and bettering myself, I found not only a physical change, I found a newfound confidence within myself that I didn't know that I could ever get. And I found not only just the from the external changes that I had, but internal changes. And I'm full belief, this is why I'm so passionate about what we do today. It's like if I can do it, literally anybody can. Because I am the last person on this planet Earth that thought I would be doing what I'm doing today. Last person that I would thought own a business. Last person I would thought create a nationwide campaign and travel the country competing in events. Last person that I thought could deadlift 300 plus pounds. And so I think people, they see me today, they see how I operate, and they just think like that's how she always was. And I just want to shake them to say, no, like if I can do it, literally any human can if they're willing to put in the work and they're willing to constantly step out of their comfort zone, to be honest with you. And so that relates back to my senior year is because that's when I was doing more of the bodybuilding competitions. And like I said, it wasn't because of bodybuilding, but it was because I did something I didn't think that I was capable of. And that broke that belief in me of, okay, what else am I capable of? Right. And also of the adage that you're a whole human. It's not just your nutrition or just your training or just your mindset isolated. Like you're a whole human. So we have to approach you and help you reach whatever goal that you want to reach in as a whole human. I was coming from the sports medicine world where it was very viewed of if you have a knee injury, it's only your knee that's injured. And I'm like, no, 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 that plays into your mentality, your nutrition plays into it, like all of these things play into it. And so this quote is honestly what got me to start my business. It's you have to be or what was it? You have to be the change that you want to see in this world.
Yes.
And I wanted to see a change in how people were viewed and that it wasn't just so isolated. And I wanted to see a change in how women's strength and confidence. And I wanted to see a change in all these different areas. And I'm like, Kels, you cannot wait for somebody else to do it. Like you cannot wait for that. You have to be the change that you want to see. And so once again, reluctantly, I didn't want to start a business, to be honest with you. I didn't want to acknowledge that tug on my heartstrings. So for me, it was a gut feeling that said, hey, go in this direction and start a business. I didn't want to because that was so outside of my comfort zone that I'm like, what is a business? What's an LLC? How do you do all this stuff, And so, but I had to acknowledge not only that feeling, but this is what also got me to start it is I think about my rocking chair theory. And I've shared this a lot with many different people. I don't think ever with you. Is I picture myself when I'm 80, 85, 90, hopefully 100 years old in my rocking chair. And I picture her with the fire going in my blanket. Like I see this image of myself. And I think about her and I think, what if, right? What if you would make these really big decisions in your life, not based on fear, but based on courage, right? My biggest success is I get to her and she's like, Kelsey, you freaking did it, girl. Yes, you were fearful. Yes, you were afraid a little bit. Yes, you had no idea what the outcome was going to go, but you went for it. And my biggest, on the flip end, fear of it is, man, you played it safe. You could have been this version of you that you didn't even know exist, but you were afraid, which is why you never actually went for it, you know? And so based on being the change I want to see and that rocking chair version of me, both of those collided. And I was like, all right, Kels, freaking go for it. I mean, it has not been easy, but it's been so worth it. And there's been a lot of failures and lessons along the way too.
Yeah, I like some of the things you said there because, I don't think when fear is present, we don't necessarily have confidence, but we do have courage, like you just talked about. And I think, again, back to that, everything's kind of cycled together. I think by the fact that you were able to stand up and look it in the eye and go for it, you started getting those small wins, which built the confidence.
Yeah.
Um, to get you to do that. And just that holistic view you talked about made me think of, I heard a quote the other day, something about we're human beings, not human doings.
Oh,
So,
it's good.
so you really kind of touched on that the heartstrings and the why and things. It's funny because how much of your pre-senior at Ohio State path do you feel was fueled by others' expectations or what you thought others' expectations were of you? I know in my case, I went down a 30-year path of doing something I hated doing because I thought I was going to let someone else down. And it wasn't until I was like, no, I'm done, that I actually got my heartstrings and my why were discovered. Do you feel that was your case up until your senior year?
I will say yes, but I didn't realize it was back then. I come from a great family. They were supportive when I wanted to start my business. But I put the expectation on myself of, well, I need to make, other people proud or other people happy. And they didn't even tell me what their expectations were of me, but I put them on myself and what I thought was a good expectation for them, And so I created all of these different expectations or pressures that one, nobody even put on me, but that I
Right.
had that weren't even there, And so I lived a lot based on that. And like I said, it was just all made up stories in my brain that once I stepped outside of that, or once I moved to the other direction, I'm like, oh, I just made up all that stuff, and I didn't even have to.
Yeah, it's 100% agree with that. That's like hits home so much. Let's jump into ruling our experiences rocks and kind of your support with that group because it's to me it's maybe pushed down into the younger female crowd, but that the mission of that, if you want, could kind of develop all that confidence in younger girls, and it's to kind of take control of what's going on with their life, decisions, relationships, career choices, kind of just what we've been talking about. Tell me a little bit about your work with them and how important that is.
It's near and dear to my heart. Everything we do, from our Empower Fitness to Mission 48, which I'll share, it is all based on helping this charity just help so many young girls. And so what ruling our experiences is it's rocks for short, is it's a 501c3, and they do 20-week programs in schools for young girls to talk about things like confidence and leadership and social media, being on your phone, and career decisions. And they do actually a lot of data for young girls too, which is scary and amazing at the same time. And there was this one data piece that they did a few years ago. They said girls 6th to 8th grade have a 26% drop in confidence. And the craziest thing is it never rebounds from that. And so just hoping that, instead of hoping that it's going to get better, or hoping that, our girls are going to have a better future, we're going to create it. And we're going to really have a program that helps that. And so then I originally got introduced to that charity about 4 years ago, with a local teacher that has a rocks group. And she wanted me to come in and talk about owning a business and being a business owner as a female. And so I went in, and I had no idea what this group was about, researched a little bit, but really didn't understand it. And so when I went in and these young girls were asking me questions about confidence, I'm like, this stuff at your age. And I had to seek it out on my own. And I learned when I was, thank God, early 20s, but some women don't learn this until 50, 60, 70 years old, And so I was already very curious about that organization. And then I had another teacher reach out and another teacher reach out. And the more I really got ingrained with their charity, I'm like, I wish I would have had this when I was younger. It would have changed my trajectory a lot. And it would have changed how I viewed myself and confidence a lot. And so then actually only about 3 months ago, 3 months ago, is I did what's called Mission 48, where I did 48 different fitness competitions in 48 states. And the kicker was in 48 days. And we did it to help raise money for young girls for ROCKS programs. And so they're just deeply in my heart. And I see a lot of these young girls at the schools that I speak at. And even the janitors are like, Kels, we notice a difference. They carry themselves taller. They're not shrinking themselves. And I'm like, that is amazing.
I think you're exactly right that they're aware of all these confidence and inner critics and self-doubt, self-talk, all these good mindset things. They're a lot more aware than perhaps in the past. But
Right.
I think there's still a big, I know a lot, but how do I actually go out and execute that? How do you tie in your work with Empower Fitness and kind of what we've been talking about in with that group who knows that, but maybe is unsure of how to take the next step towards it?
Yeah, yeah. So specifically how we work with rocks in our Empower Fitnesses, well, like for our competition, for example, a amount of the proceeds went to their actual organization. So it's $100 per one girl for a 20-week program. And so we usually like to fund at least 50 to 100 girls per year through our Empower Fitness. Granted, the financials are there and we're able to. So that's how we work with them with that. And they say something great with their organization, which I think will hit home towards the end of it. It's that confidence isn't just communicated, that it's built through experiences. And they do something great at their organization. It's called the self-defense lesson. And they get all these young girls in late elementary and middle school, and they have them break a board, like an actual board, like a karate chop board. And they use their voice for the first time and saying, like, no, like they were potentially going to get attacked, but they use their voice and saying no. And they broke the board. And just like that, that is an experience builder for these confidence in girls, that it's not just, hey, be confident, or hey, look in the mirror and tell yourself you're confident. It's like, no, you show yourself, you realize how that confidence is built, not just through words. It can be, but a lot of times through experiences, and they facilitate these experiences for these young girls, which are incredible.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of good, you made a lot of good points tonight that keeps thinking of getting thoughts in my head. But I think, we can get, if there's no like weight behind those words, it's easy to go out there and, and not that I don't like affirmations or anything, but it's easy to run out there and be like, oh, I'm bold and I'm strong and I'm fierce and whatever it is. But eventually reality's smacking you in the face and you're like, well, hold on a second. Um, Maybe I'm not. And then your critics gets in and your self-doubt and your self-talk and all that stuff. Um, how do you work with all the athletes and all the rocks girls in kind of blending in that, hey, you still got reality's reality, and
Yeah.
the way you face it, some days are good, some days are rougher. How do you navigate that space with them?
Oh, this is a great. I have never had anybody ask me these questions, and I love this. I could talk to you for the next 2 hours about this. But as you were talking about that, the image of a table came up in my brain, and I'm gonna pull context to this. So, how a belief is actually formed and built. Think of a table, okay, and think of the top of the table as an idea of either I am smart or I am confident, right? And what supports that table are legs, right? And so if you don't really have much proof, meaning a leg on the table that supports that statement, you might say it 5, 10, 15 times, but ultimately that table is going to fall down because it doesn't have enough legs to support it, right? And this is not to say that if you don't have proof or evidence of, hey, I'm confident, that you can never build it, but this is where action and this is where building proof comes in to support that belief or that tabletop, right? And so if I'm saying, for example, like, hey, I'm a confident human, right? I build legs on my table, like, hey, I sign up for this competition, and even if I'm scared, I'm going to show up, I'm going to do the thing, and I'm going to keep the promise to myself. Boom, leg underneath your table, right? Or hey, you know what? If I say I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. and I'm going to go train, I don't hit the snooze button, boom, I go train. Leg underneath my table. I keep promises to myself, right? And so this is where showing yourself and basically creating proof for yourself that that idea or belief exists, in my opinion, is very important, which I really advocate, which is why we have our events, to sign up for the things that you're afraid of, to, like you talked about on Friday, put yourself on stages that you don't think you belong on, or sign up for that thing that you're afraid of, because not only will you gain experience through whatever that thing is, you're ultimately building legs on that table and you're casting a vote for who you want to be, right? And that ultimately is going to help you not only take that identity on, but show yourself, hey, I don't just say this about myself, I am this, because I prove it to myself there. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that was what was coming up in my brain as you were talking about it.
Yeah, well, if it didn't, it certainly fulfilled another piece of my interest. You just made me think there at the end. You're like, how do you want to set your table, kind of present yourself out to the world? But you also gave a visual, a four-legged table to my well, why, better, how. If we work on those four things as legs, we have proof within ourselves.
Oh, that's good. That's
Yeah, I
good.
kind of I like that.
You could take it and run. No,
It,
no need to
it,
trademarks.
it'll,
It's definitely
it'll
not
be
mine.
our table. Okay, so last question, because I've been very interested in the space of, kind of autonomy in development, more as the coach of us as a facilitator rather than someone who has all the answers and stuff.
Yeah.
So when like the three of the big things from self-determination theory are autonomy, competence, and relatedness.
Mm.
Um, how can you see those three things, autonomy, competence, and relatedness? How can you see those three things threaded through what you're offering?
Oh, that's a great question. So I'll first hit on autonomy. Okay. And because I think this is specifically important for not only who we work with, but whatever goal, whatever aspiration that you're working towards, this is huge. That if you just, I'll relate this in how we do it, like, so fitness and nutrition training, right? We give a training programming. Yes, you can check off the box of hitting your protein goal, right? But if I also don't give you autonomy and not only deciding the goals that you have for you, because you know your goals better than I know them, as your coach, you know you better than I know you. And so that autonomy, and not only, yes, setting the target or the goal that you have, but also you being in the process with me as your coach, understanding the training or asking questions or understanding how to flip a movement. If you don't have a cable machine, how do I do this in a dumbbell, right? You understand that you have autonomy of yourself and that you have control in the process of it too, right? And so I tell everybody, you should not need me as your coach forever. If you do, I'm not doing my job right. Because ultimately, I want you to be at a spot where you're like, Kels, love you did great work, I can do this on my own. And I'm like, that's how every coach, in my opinion, in the nutrition and fitness world should be. Doesn't mean that you never need a coach. I still have a coach and I'm 8 years very experienced into this, right? But I want a coach and I don't need them, right? And so that's autonomy is huge from a fitness and nutrition and how we work aspect of it. Second one was relatedness.
Relatedness and competence.
Relatedness. So, and I don't know specifically what it means with the self-determination theory. So if I say this wrong comparatively, I apologize. But relatedness with that is even just as a community piece of it. Yes, you relate to one another. And that's why, once again, it goes back to our community aspect of it. You do, my opinion, you should not do life alone. You don't need to do life alone, right? And when you have that crew, that community that picks you up on hard days or help or like shines a light on you on the days that you're winning, right? That makes everything so much better. And then competence piece of it, that comes from the entire journey. You are not going to be competent day one, nor should you be. And that's also what scares a lot of individuals from not starting, because they're not competent in whatever thing that they're trying to do. You shouldn't be. You're not going to know what you're doing. And I'm many times into this, but you build that competence through the process, through the experience, and you learn over time. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that is my best guess at the self-determination theory and what we do.
No, that was great, and it's funny. I half the time I don't know what I'm doing on a daily basis. So it's funny you said that. But the other thing I thought about for the relatedness and the community and the support, I think on the individual side of that, it's important that we understand the value in asking for help is more of a strength, and it's still viewed as a weakness so much across so many avenues of life that, like you said, we can't all do it alone. As Abby Wambach said, where's my wolf pack to lift me up?
Yeah, yeah. And our best clients, I'll tell you this too. Our best clients are the ones that ask questions. I tell everybody, you do not have to be perfect, nor should you, but use me, lean on me, ask me questions, tell me the amazing day, tell me the hard day, tell me everything in between. And those are the individuals that grow the most out when we work with them. So asking for help is not only a superpower, you fast track your way to whatever success that you're working towards because you're willing to put yourself out there and ask for help too.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that from the coach's perspective too, with some transparency and maybe a bit of vulnerability. In my world, it's like, hey, I'm not the keeper of all goalie knowledge. What did you see? Why did you choose this? So just getting them involved in that process touches all three of those legs of that self-determination theory table.
I love it.
No, I love that. Kelsey, this was awesome. Um, I am going to put the links for your social medias and your websites and stuff in the notes, but I'd also like you to tell people where can they reach out and get hold of you if they're interested in following you or maybe shooting you a question.
Yeah, and I love talking to all the humans. So if you're like, "Oh, should I reach out to her?" Please do. Like I know potentially it makes your, but it makes my day when people are like, "Hey, I took this one nugget from the podcast, or this really hit home," because that's at least my end all be all goal is if I help one human, like, hey, that is a day well lived. So it's pretty easy at Kelsey Lensman, which I'll spell it out on all socials, kelseylensman.com on website. Basically, if you type my name, something will pop up. So it's KelseyLensman. Type it away, and I will be there for you on the other side.
Awesome. Again, thank you. It was so amazing getting introduced to you, coming down to Columbus and seeing your organization in action and just empowering those female athletes, which breathed life into me. So I
Oh,
appreciate you, and you helped me.
Oh, and I appreciate you. There is, and I know we didn't get into this, and I have to hop off, but it was a random call and a random email that brought you into my world, and I was just amazed at your generosity and your willingness to just jump in and be a part of it. And I'll forever cherish just our relationship that we'll build through this. So anything I can do for you, your crew, or any of the women listening to this, girls listening to this, I am full believer in what you're doing. I'm excited to see you continue to grow.
I certainly appreciate that. We may have to do this again because I feel like I could talk another couple
Oh,
hours.
please do. We could nerd out on so many different directions, and I would love that.
Kelsey, until next time, thank you very much.
All right, buddy.